I look at this procession of images and can't quite comprehend it. Even sitting here now editing this video, I feel it in my bones. The words have to leave my mouth. I just think more people should be talking about this. I think we might have actually made a mistake, to be honest. There are a lot of important years across the history of video games. 1998 was literally the best to ever do it, and 2023 was literally the worst time for anyone who makes anything. As a community, we don't exactly argue about those times. We have our favourites for sure, but at the end of the day, we will shut up and recognise what we should. My problem though is that not enough people seem to remember a time that I think should have been part of similar conversations. My problem is that in 2014, Alien Isolation pulled off a damn magic trick, and it didn't set everyone on fire. Now I get it, an immediate glance doesn't necessarily spell out that this should have been Game of the Year. In fact, like a lot of the games from 2014 that are still being dissected, that are still being played, Alien Isolation wasn't even nominated for that honour. Cult status aside, one thing it has undeniably earned, however, is lasting respect. Creative Assembly produced an experience that's remembered not just for an unparalleled standard of detail, not just for relentless enemy AI, but for being a possibly timeless, genuine step inside of a film. A team that had been typically focused on strategy games, Creative Assembly embraced a hard swerve and developed a sequel to Ridley Scott's Alien, directly in the form of a video game. Unlike most developers who have gotten their hands on an interesting license, Creative Assembly chose the hardest possible assignment. They didn't sit comfortably in the limited confines of a universe that they'd been offered, and they didn't selectively pick the shiny pieces that felt at home in the take that they wanted to craft. They made the job nothing less than putting us closer to those events, characters, and locations than the actual boots on the ground of a production that happened 35 years ago. Set years after the events of the original film, you play as Amanda Ripley, daughter of Ellen herself, chartered to travel to the Sevastopol space station in search of answers about what really happened. What made her mother and her crew disappear all those years ago will be made very clear. You're locked inside a space-bound hunting ground, running and hiding from the alien itself, as perfect and as lethal as you've always known it to be. Now yes, on paper that isn't exactly earth-shattering. Impressive game adaptations existed before this, and to be fair, it wasn't even the only game of that year doing the exact same thing. I consider it worthwhile though, think that it should have been a trendsetter, and I can't get it out of my head, all because of what it will convince me to deny. The so-called magic trick being what the experience proves games is capable of, what they were now ready to replicate. With knowledge of the original film in mind, when you play this game, you see the 35 years, but you do not feel it. To watch one and then play the other, to play and then watch, is to believe that the original production never ended. If I hadn't lived even a fraction of the time difference, if they weren't two stories told through two different mediums, then the two being of the same vision would seem like fact to me. It is known that they didn't, but after playing, it's easy to think that those same, not new creatives just never stopped working. To me, they may as well come from the exact same place. I have to stop to remind myself that, no, the engine was not just left running. The highest praise that I think I can give being that no other production of this scale or with this intent manages to get you to a place where you expect to hear Ridley himself behind you yelling, "Cut!" It's especially impressive too that Creative Assembly chose to do this with, of all things, a franchise that at the time was considered by many to be unfortunately damaged goods. The xenomorph is chief among all horrors that can make you spend the rest of your life thinking about it. Few other terrors truly feel like they're still waiting out there for us somewhere in the stars. I do understand therefore why we've gone back to see it as many times as we have, but it has without doubt done the creature more harm than good, never more so than when it appeared in one particular title. At the time of Isolation's release, the Xeno had just been character assassinated in the game Aliens Colonial Marines. A disaster on the scale of Cyberpunk or Fallout 76, the game that the public got their hands on was a product of deceit, chasing the trends of the industry in a broken state. The leadership behind it should really have never gotten away with the dishonesty that they allowed to thrive, and I'm truly sad to see people move on from it like they have. Creative Assembly therefore had to have done some of their work with the state of the creature in mind. Those who loved it like they clearly did had been burned, so they understood the assignment. They knew that they would need to do nothing less than travel back in time to really do this nightmare justice once more. They knew that only hell itself was deserved. They also weren't blind to the fact that the tone and the sequences that made aliens, well, aliens, were now cliches to a genre that the work had once helped define. In a world where something like Halo existed, no alien game would ever step out of that particular shadow. It would just be another bug hunt. So instead, they studied what had started in Castle Brennenburg, found its way through Mount Massive Asylum, a certain pizzeria, and had now found its way to Sevastopol. Choosing to discard the safer stepping stone that was Cameron's take on the creature, Creative Assembly went straight where Ridley did and denied any power fantasy. Focusing specifically on the perfect organism line, the sophistication of the AI that the xenomorph was built with made actually getting away from the beast as much of a talking point as how scary the alien was again. Early testing saw that when players were given guns, they were hesitant to open fire on the creature, so the developers ran to the bank with that data. It became the first occasion where the instruction of to hide to survive wasn't met with frustration. We all knew exactly what was waiting, so how can you not reply, yes sir? Despite having been realized in different games before, the work of Creative Assembly became close to the definitive rendition. Knowledge of every glorious inch that had been studied and loved for decades was all put to use to craft a perfect lightness and relentlessness. Not having to create a whole hive of aliens to deal with, Creative Assembly were free to construct a singular entity that shined so horribly when all lights were on it. Kept in the shadows for so much of the original film, to see this hulking monstrosity loom over you when you were hidden under a bed, or to see it sprint at you to close the distance, it gave a physicality to Geiger's design that was previously unseen. The presence of the alien pulls on primordial fears that we don't typically think of first. It is huge in a way that dwarfs you, and it gets so close that you dare not breathe in its presence. It's intimidating because it can't help but reduce you. You can't even begin to articulate the fear beyond the primal sensation of, oh god, I hope it doesn't see me. I know for a fact that I'd have had this thing moving on all fours or crawling on the ceiling if I were directing it, but honestly I'd be presenting nothing new. The slow, prowling, predatory progression through the corridors, or its near invisibility in the deep black of the dark are wholly captivating. They let this thing breathe as the technology once might not have permitted the alien to do so, constructing a digital skeleton that was still faithful to the old plastic, metal and rubber. It didn't have to be a new take, it just had to be the finest visual representation to date. The work was done to see the alien not achieve the obvious, but just let its whole form intimidate when you were cornered into taking it in. All of it being done to remind you exactly what staring at the sun for too long will do to you. The animations stemming from what you can and cannot see spell out exactly what's about to happen to you. The delicate descents from the vents, the slow drip of the saliva, when you see the rattling of its teeth in a death animation as its inner jaw bursts from its mouth. Every frame oozed passion. Whilst I do think that the creature's introduction comes a little bit out of nowhere, it's awkwardly paced, the aggression never misses. I absolutely love when you can spot it arching its back as it leans in to put a hole in the head of its victim. There's a moment of pause when it finds you. It takes you in before it lunges, crushing the victim's head in its hands before it drags them into hell. I live for these touches that add more than just legitimacy. As an incarnation more in your face than any other before it, the xenomorph becomes not a construct to scrutinize, but the alien that will make you a victim of the details, the fear that we've been obsessed with. Realized to state perfectly, coldly, these violent delights have violent ends. The creature did have to make use of the occasional jump scare to make its point, but to me they rarely ever felt unearned. The perception of its unfairness became something of a barrier to entry for some people at the time, in a way that, strangely, might see it succeed today. I saw it all as part of the package though. The alien had sought you out successfully, or you hadn't planned well enough to misdirect it, therefore it would kill you how it pleased. Encounters with it were brutal, it was constantly harrowing, as it needed to be. This was decimation endearing to the desolate outlook of the original film, haunting proof of just how unprepared we truly are. That fact, if not spelled out very clearly by the alien itself, will be something that you see every inch of this oppressive space station screaming at you. Once the alien is let loose on the station, Sevastopol has only one use for warm flesh, to remind us exactly where we now sit in the food chain. Where they could have really gone to town, splashing the bioorganic matter of the alien all over the walls and the floors, Creative Assembly instead said, how about bodies just fucking everywhere? Few spaces in this game won't possess a corpse with the innards of its skull on show or plastered all over the scene. Busy little creatures indeed. The mist, the hum of the lights, the smoke billowing out of the exhausts, sparks flying, and the glint of the sun itself, all down to the very blinking of the screens. They're not just a masterclass in dynamic lighting and set design, but a true weaponization of the sterile construct. If you go to film school someday and you're asked to make science fiction like I was, then I cannot recommend it enough. Study the time you have in these corridors. You'll witness a true lesson in how to build an uncaring space. The slow shutting off of those last lights are an encroaching coldness, a suffocating chant of your impending meaninglessness. It beckons the alien to make this a solely industrial space. Flesh built this place as a monument to the self, and now it rejects us. It welcomes the alien to make all that it touches a monument to how small we are to both, a monument to our failure. They sadly never went as far as to truly turn off all the lights, to let that hate really settle in, but they never let the technology give you an edge. Everything you find here will eventually be useless against the alien. Nothing is now not a part of its waking nightmare. The unfortunate truth is that there is no contemplating hope here. You will be made shockingly aware of your vulnerabilities. The alien or the void just on the other side of the metal will bring you back to stark reality. You are destined for death, but how long you avoid that final encounter is still in your hands. The only thing that you possess in the middle of that deadly game of cat and mouse is what you do with the knowledge that somewhere around the next corner, this thing will get you. It just has to be you who manages to react first. The security of something like a safe room or an uninterruptible game system are staples that the genre has relied upon for decades for breaks in tension, but they don't exist here. You cannot shatter any sense that you've managed to outlast the system that the creature is stuck in. The key to survival is in what elements of consistency you can spot solely on the alien. You're actually more armed than is normal for these kind of games, but you are still paralyzed, not by powerlessness, but by your ability to read the hunt. All you've got is relatively mundane tech at your disposal. You can condense the design ethos down to the fact that you'll never see an LCD screen. This stuff is of the future, yeah, but it still manages to feel distant. Something like a touchscreen is never going to be in sight, because that self-imposed dedication to retrofuturism just immediately screams hopelessness in the face of the alien. Eventually you'll disregard everything that you find as a relic, when any visual trembles and lessens in the presence of the alien. All it can do is just exist to get you thinking about maneuvering the alien. Use a noisemaker here and get the beast over there, beat it back with a Molotov before it can close the distance, sneak by while it's distracted, or make it retreat by force. Choose wisely and assess correctly, because what works now will rarely do the same thing twice. The alien forces you to evaluate different strategies for taking advantage of its vulnerabilities. You've just got a split second to choose what will be less lethal for you for the alien to find a way to adapt to. The perfect organism ultimately doesn't force you to expend resources, but eventually discard their utility entirely. I mean, just look at the motion tracker. A key focus throughout much of the marketing and your only constant piece of equipment can actually give more of an edge to the alien than we believed we knew. Another prop that was iconic to the film that kind of shook things up for the time for not just being another torch. With it, you would be able to track the vague location and maybe even the approach of the alien and plan accordingly. To use it, however, was to discover that just because you knew where it was not the same as knowing how to deal with it. The beeping and the alerts, they became a twisted diegetic heart rate monitor of sorts, a perfect initiator of anxiety. Whilst it could be part of the difference between life and death, I never found it to not make me panic. Often deliberately unreliable and an actual source of attraction to the alien itself, what should have been a constant immersive prop was equally proof of just how much was being twisted against you. After it becomes truly invulnerable to almost everything that you've tried to throw at it, you realize the highest praise that you could honestly give to the alien is that the bar has not been raised by AI like this since. Don't get me wrong, certain designs have left striking impressions, but even the best of them have had to build on the same systemic horror. I really hope that I'm proven wrong soon, but no breed of stalker yet compares. To be honest, you genuinely need something like Bob Sap in your life after playing for too long just to calm yourself down. The anxiety that makes it so difficult to go back, stemming from the fact that by some tremendous feat, the alien works perfectly. The generation was actually entering a period of really nailing being able to maintain technical proficiency when it came to non-playable AI, so the standard was incredibly high. As the makers of The Last Guardian found out, if you have your AI seem to, or actually legitimately step out of line, players will not put up with it. So to get technical for a moment, the xenomorph is AI beyond comparison, programmed to perfection, knowing exactly where and when it's best to participate in a shockingly bug-free experience from start to finish. The instinct has been in contemporary recreations of the xenomorph across media to update or personalize Geiger's design in some way, but Creative Assembly spent years just examining the existing traits that made it tick. Thanks to an extensive behavior tree, as you progress through the Sevastopol, the Alien 2 begins to progress and develop. Every step is guided by the steady elevation of tension. The alien would move from scouting set paths and chasing the sounds that you made, onto directly picking its own points of interest, and making a home of the trappings that you'd eventually be forced to progress through. It's as close to a perfect sense of it learning as you could get. In this almost sadistic decision from the developers themselves, the alien was armed with an AI director, which told the creature at all times exactly where you were, information being drip-fed to it in small hints. Effectively being a bloodhound on a leash, it got the scent from the director, and then using the dozens of sensor nodes that it was covered in, it would hone in on whatever hints your panic was stimulating. The thing had legitimate eyes in the back of its head, and it needed very little to decide to pursue. Informed directly by this system known as the menace gauge, the alien was ensured to appear precisely as you were getting maybe a little bit too comfortable. When menace was low, the creature was told to get to work, being given enough hints to accelerate your flight or fight response. Decisive fought or patience to hide playing straight into the hunt. Even the slightest interaction could become genuine components to instill fear. Maintaining an eye line with the alien or general proximity became fuel for the menace gauge. Climbing into a locker was a good hiding place, but it would tempt the alien to stand directly on the other side of that door until you could no longer bear it, and almost found relief in seeing your one barrier ripped from its hinges. If the alien was near, then it was to make you scared, but it was still smart enough to know if it was being a direct hindrance to progress. As soon as it began to teeter on becoming an annoyance, it would move to a new location. It just let you think that you got lucky, knowing that it still had everything it would need to find you again. I relished in my bones the relentless hate that this thing seemed to have for me. Every previous revisitation of this monster saw its integrity lessened. It wasn't always by choice, but it always mattered. If this experience made you want to beat your head against a wall, then so be it. What some did criticize as a bit of an unfair hunt was to me nothing short of another chance to see perfection realized. I could submit for the majesty I would receive. To be honest, I really can't understand those people who complained about being outmatched. I've always found the claim to be unjustified. I mean, come on, an encounter with Ridley Scott's Alien means that difficulty was part of the contract that you were buying into, and never once did I feel like I was cheated because of it. Every death caused frustration, sure, but how could they also not make me think at the same time? You clever girl. I thought about Creative Assembly's first foray into this genre for over a decade at this point because of what they proved. With available permission, they recreated detail that modern filmmaking couldn't, and in its wake, I've sat wondering why it hasn't been challenged as soon as it could have. Why have we only just gotten a Rogue City or The Great Circle? Why hasn't something like Jurassic Park Survival been in our hands for years? The likes of Rocksteady or Insomniac have offered the most inviting new template for developers to follow, but I simply cannot fathom the comparison. Isolation should have been this game-changing moment, rather than just an achievement respected at a distance. The true prestige of Creative Assembly's magic trick being not just immersion, but the genuine spirit of the original recaptured so specifically. Time hasn't necessarily been kind to Isolation. A following hasn't greatly grown from its example. I think because to craft a vision like this is to commit to an outlook and see it through. As tempting as it must have been to give a character named Ripley the depth that they deserve, there is still credit to be given to a maybe intentional disdain for anything but the alien. Outside of the opening hours, Ripley's character potential is discarded, and no one on the station is given any time to breathe. As the original Alien progresses, you slowly discover a hero, but you slowly lose one as events unfold here. No light was offered to cling to, only darkness. The original film was always such a bleak experience. Creative Assembly were just bold enough to state that it may only have been so grim because we were a part of it. Almost all encounters with the xenomorph have been coerced or accidental, but this one was self-inflicted. Ripley ran towards this. History be damned. This time, the killing was of our own making. The events that unfold state as loudly as any other entry in this franchise that our feet should have stayed on the ground. You came out here looking for one thing, and now you'll get the worst version of what closure could possibly look like. We are small and vulnerable, destined for death, and to go to space is to be shot straight towards it. A reward for everything that we do here, everything we survive, being not a life that's forever changed, but still life. Instead, it's just the black of the infinite mass. In the original film, there was stark messaging from Scott, harsh subtext, but I find a true rejection of man itself somehow even more chilling. Ripley once again bests the alien, but it comes at the cost of discovering how small we are, and that we deserve to know that. Blasting the Sevastopol to hell and dragging the last of the xenomorphs into the void with you, you float in the dark with no sign of rescue. The might of the vacuum, the limitless expanse, or the time bomb of gravity, death is everywhere in space. The odds against Ripley didn't start when she arrived at the Sevastopol. The clock started when she and everyone else here touched the stars to begin with. We are ultimately the alien here, and an invading one at that. For our mark left upon it, we will now be forced to float forever across thousands of miles of space. Not a single mark, even in the void, left on the alien. Once there was hope for what even some might do out here someday, even inconsequentially, but now we just have a warning that to assert our purpose is to get what we deserve. That spirit is once again weaponized to ask how dare we presume to wander, to inhabit. For all that we have sacrificed to touch the stars, we will never escape the fact that we touch a realm not designed for anything, and that we have only one place in. In the end, if it's not the creature, then space itself will reduce us to nothing. It will see us float like debris endlessly in the infinite dark. Pride is to be punished because now it means more than achievement. We will be left alone in sheer isolation. Alone with just one piece of information, that you are lost. Space itself has demanded a damnation of us. The alien is just the arbiter of that judgment. Someday, without a planet, our existence won't just be fragile, but any remaining proof of it will be so easily erased. They have both come to wait for the same thing. Space and the aliens seek our end. Whether it's inches from the egg or ripped into the void, all will be made to pay for our carelessness. Creation itself seems to have decreed that we deserve hell for even dreaming to put ourselves, our plague that killed our world, onto any more of its expanse. The company may have been the ones to send us here, but if space cannot strike at them directly, then it will settle for whoever dares stand before it, dispatched with its most cold and mechanical hand. Maybe isolation has no equal. Maybe we'll see more of its breed than perhaps I'm maybe giving credit. Because how do you not follow, how do you not chase a game that whispers and screams, you deserve hell?